I was born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. My grandfather on my father's side was a minister, and my grandmother was a homemaker. And I didn't really know a great deal about my mother's relatives. My parents were Jenny Moliere and Glenn William Jenkins. My mother was a homemaker, and my father owned the small community grocery store. I can remember from my early childhood that he had the store, to the best of my memory. And at one point, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, he would put a stool behind the cash register. He taught me to count money, and I was his first cashier. But I'm sure today that could not happen because it would be violating the child labor law. My mother was a homemaker, and at one point in my early life, I'm told that there were 5 of us. I was the third of 3 children. I had brothers who died at a very young age, and after I was born, my mother passed when I was 6 months old. So at one point there were 5, and we ended up being just 2 in the end. There were like 5 siblings on my father's side, and it was like I belonged to all of them. My Aunt Lottie was an educator, well above out front when it came to education and making sure that we had proper nutrition, a good education. In fact, when I was about 3 years old, she taught at the Winston-Salem, was at Teachers College at the time, and she was in the field of child care and home economics. Took me to school with her and learned to read really at a young age, to count, and as I'd come home, I had cousins and I would teach them. They weren't too happy with some of the things I said to them because I thought I knew much more than I did really know. I participated in the laboratory school at the Teachers College. At that time, students who were in their junior and senior years had courses to prepare them for student teaching in the public schools there. So we were the ones that they worked with in their early training. I loved school, and I always have. Even until today, I go out to lifelong learning and just pursued education. At the high school, I participated in sports. For example, I was on the basketball team, swimming team, and during the summers, I was trained to be a lifesaver, junior lifesaver at the pool. And I think that I still love sports. I attended college in the hometown that I was born and reared in, Winston-Salem Teachers College. It's now Winston-Salem State University. My major was elementary education. At that time, that was really what was offered to us, elementary education. And then you could pursue home economics as another component. But I received my BS degree.
I was born in Chesapeake City, Maryland, in the early 30s, 1932 to be in fact, in Kent County, in Cecil County, Maryland. My parents were George Wright and Alice Wright. My dad was born in around Middletown. I know very little about my father because he and my mother separated very early. But my mother was born right in the same house that I was born in Chesapeake City, Maryland. My mother was a chef, or at that time, I don't know what they would have called him, but she was the head cook at Schaefer's Canal House in Chesapeake City, Maryland. My father did a variety of things. He drove a truck, he did a lot of labor jobs, and a little bit of everything, and just to make sure we had food on the table, even though he and my mother had separated. Basically, my mother and I stayed with my grandfather. My grandmother died very early in when my mother was young. And my mother and I lived with her father for many, many years in the same house. And you know, strange about that house, because when you look at it, you wonder, how could a person of that modest income obtain a house like that on the waterfront? This house sits on a waterfront, and he obtained that house somehow through his employer. And the stories of that, he brought home one day the kitchen portion of the house on a horse and buggy and connected it to the house, which is still in place today. I started school in a one-room schoolhouse in Chesapeake City, Maryland. I went there for 5 years, and then I moved on to Elkton at George Washington Carver. You know, it's strange. I try to keep my kids and grandkids aware of the history and how things go. I remember taking my grandson to see this one-room schoolhouse, and I thought I was teaching him a little history. And when I looked around after showing him the schoolhouse I went to, he was on the ground laughing and rolling, and he's questioning, well, where's the cafeteria? And where's the playground? I said, what you see is what you get. But I came out, I was the last class of 11th grade school system. And then the very next year, they went 12 years. But the year I graduated, we only went 11 years. And it was kind of unusual to think that you only went 11 years, and now, you know, starting in 1950, the year after I graduated, you had to go 12 years. Went to college at University of Maryland Eastern Shore. At that time, it was Maryland State College in Princess Anne, Maryland. Some strange stories about Maryland State in the early years. You know, very small colleges, and for some entertainment, we had to go downtown. It was a strange thing about that. I remember one night going downtown to the movies, and never encountered anything like this. I remember at this portion, even in my hometown, to go to the movies, you had to go upstairs. But in Princess Anne, we went upstairs, and at the end of the movie, a police officer came, put his arms out, and let the other folks out until when they got out, we could leave. But upstairs is where we had to sit, and we could not leave the movie until the other folks got out.
I just started feeding homeless under the bridge right here in Wilmington. And I would feed about 4 or 5 people. I did that for 2 or 3 years, and my mother encouraged me. And then we went over to Henrietta Johnson Medical Center, and we started feeding about 10, 15 people. People would donate food and help me cook, and so we did that for like 2, 3 years. Then Paul Tigani, who was a friend, he donated like 20 turkeys. That's a big deal, right? So we ride around Southbridge Project, giving away like 20 turkeys for 3 or 4 years. Then Judge Farnan and the Farnan family got involved, like, why are you giving away 20 turkeys? Why don't we donate 100 turkeys? 100 turkeys. That was pretty amazing. So we would go to the high-rise and give each high-rise like 5 or 10 turkeys.
Reminds me of my great aunt. You know, my great aunt, when we was growing up in Southbridge, you know, that's what she did. You know, she fed all the kids, and and all the people in Southbridge early in the morning. You know, you got a hot meal, you know, free breakfast.
As the years kept going on, the Kitty Foundation and people were donating canned goods and turkeys. Then we started giving each high-rise like 20 turkeys. Then, because the magnitude, then foreign family said, oh, we're going to donate 800 turkeys. And this person said, we're donating 100, so we started giving 75 turkeys. And then the ideal just came, it was time to try statewide. And once we connected with the Boys and Girls Club, George Capacity and Lisa Lynch, it took off. So now, to answer your question, we went from feeding 5 people under the Bridge 5 homeless to feeding like 3,200 statewide.
Well, you know, when we first started, yes, we was just going to the senior high-rises and going inside each one of those buildings and handing a turkey over to, you know, some of our seniors and individuals who were living in those high-rises at that time. It was just such a great heartfelt feeling to see. They was like, wow, a major gift. And some people said, oh, it's just a turkey. But to them, it was food that was going to last them for quite some time. And to know that how minor the effort or how major the effort that someone did to participate, to make it successful, to know that you were making such a great impact on someone's life. I mean, you can't help but feel great joy and excitement about being a part of such an activity. But now that it's statewide, we're making a major impact on the lives of many. You know, some people don't really understand how massive our hunger problem here in the state of Delaware. You know, we're just assuming that everybody has food because they might have food in their refrigerator. But we have many families who are actually hungry. And to know that on a day such as Thanksgiving, where it's marketed everywhere, the families are together, having this great, big, enormous meal on their table, and to know that people don't even have bread or butter, and to know that you're putting turkey, and now we're even adding the fixings along with it. Wow, that is a major, major accomplishment and philanthropical effort that I'm proud to be part of.
I tell you what really makes me happy, Paul, is really the seniors. Like, I enjoy the Boys and Girls Club, I enjoy the families, but for me, it's nothing like those seniors. And they wait for that, they wait for that.
I've seen people who have came to me personally, you know, because you don't never know who you touch. You don't never who you touch, what type of people you're touching, you know what I mean? But people have came to me and said, wow, you know, hey man, I remember you, man, thank you so much. You know, you really helped my family, man. You know, you really helped my girlfriend and her children, or you helped my mother or my grandmother. You know what I mean? Had Thanksgiving this year, man. You guys are doing a tremendous job, man. Thank you so much. That means more to me than anything. You know, to know and to watch and to witness. You know, to see my theory is this here, you know, may the work you do speak for you. You know what I'm saying? If you can just help somebody as you go along, as you pass along, you know, then your living is just not be in vain. You know, so that means a lot to me when I can see a smiling face, or I know that a child, you know what I'm saying, got a meal for a couple of days, you know what I mean, and was able, you know, to remember that as they get older, you know what I'm saying, and can see you somewhere along down the line, because you don't never, like I said, you never know who you touch, but when you see the seniors, you know, that means a lot to me, those seniors.
Well, you know, it makes them feel that, gosh, somebody really does care. Perfect strangers. There's someone, you know, that they don't know who they are, but someone cared enough to share food and took the time to help raise money or to organize this event, to bring it all the way to my front door. You know, that really makes a person who's down on their luck really feel, well, this world is compassionate, that I'm not alone, and that hopefully that gives them some even strength and encouragement, the nutrition, and the strength and encouragement to know that, well, you know, maybe now with my stomach full, I can get up out of this, you know, because there are people that I can call upon to assist me, because the world does care about my plight.
Founded on April 10, 1948, The Wilmington, Delaware chapter of the Links Incorporated has spent 70 years creating service projects designed to enhance the quality of life for residents in the Wilmington community. Today, the Wilmington, Delaware chapter boasts a membership of 60 women who perform transformational programming in 5 facets: services to youth, the arts, national trends and services, international trends and services, and health and human services. Born in the aftermath of World War II and facing new concerns in human rights, social and racial justice, the organization was of necessity compelled to respond to its national environment. One of the earliest chapter meetings was hosted in the fall of 1948 by K. Lorraine Hamilton and Elizabeth H. Anderson. At this meeting, the members planned aid to local hospitals, a toy shower, and a party for underprivileged children. The 1950s was a busy decade for the organization, with many of the activities either focusing on civil rights or supporting civil rights organizations. The first documented event was an author's tea featuring renowned scholar J. Saunders Redding and Dr. Ira Jiggett. Redding, a professor at Brown University and Guggenheim scholar, was the brother of Lewis L. Redding. Another early activity held in 1951 was an interracial talent show to benefit the United Negro College Fund. The event was held at Howard High School, and performers came from such institutions as Lewis High School, the University of Delaware, Wilmington High School, and Ezion Church. Among the judges was noted drama critic for the journal Every Evening, Ashworth Burslam. The MC for the event was Joe Bostic, the first African-American radio disc jockey in New York City. In these early years, the Wilmington Links brought many African-American celebrities to the city. For their first major fashion show to raise money for the NAACP, they presented the well-known Towel Sisters. Lois was a Juilliard-trained concert pianist who performed throughout the U.S. and Europe, and Dorothea was a well-known model who wore creations by Schiaparelli and Dior. This event was the precursor to the Ebony Fashion Fair. Later that year, the Links presented a $500 check to the NAACP at the National Conference in West Virginia. This was one of the first major contributions to the NAACP. These donations continued over the years, and eventually the chapter became a life member of the organization. Never afraid to attack tough issues, the chapter in 1956 actively supported the boycott of segregated movie theaters in Dover, Smyrna, and Middletown. On September 16, 1957, the Links sponsored Duke Ellington and his orchestra at the Playhouse. It was the first time Ellington had appeared in Delaware, and the event received considerable attention in the press and attracted an audience of approximately 900. In a review, Henry F. Davidson stated, "The Wilmington chapter of the Links Incorporated raised the cultural level of the state several notches in bringing the master to the Playhouse. If some other organization wants to match this contribution, perhaps they should try to get the Metropolitan Opera Company."
Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay. The great American poet Robert Frost had it right when he wrote, "Nothing gold can stay." Like nature, life, my friends, is transient. And what better place to celebrate that melancholy sentiment
than here at the Wilmington and Brandywine Cemetery, one of our city's most peaceful and beautiful places.
Wilmington and Brandywine Cemetery is a classic example of the rural or romantic style cemetery. This style of cemetery came into vogue in the early to mid 18th century. Prior to this time, burials in cities such as Wilmington were confined to small church graveyards, such as the one found at Old Swedes Church on Wilmington's east side. As cities grew, graveyards became overcrowded, and urban dwellers nationwide became fearful of possible health risks then associated with graveyards. Fears no doubt spurred on by a nationwide cholera epidemic in 1832, as well as the threat of other infectious diseases. The rural cemetery movement in America began in Cambridge, Massachusetts with the Mount Auburn Cemetery, which was inspired by Paris's Père Lachaise Cemetery. The rural cemetery movement was a radical rethinking of what a burial ground should be. Planners envisioned large-scale settings with sweeping vistas and lush landscaping. In short, a place not just for the dead, but a pleasure ground for the living. In fact, rural cemeteries preceded public parks as a place to commune with nature.
The Wilmington and Brandywine Cemetery was planned and founded by Samuel Wollaston in 1843 on a portion of his farm, Windsor. Upon his death in 1875, Samuel Wollaston himself was buried here in the cemetery.
Don't be sad for Wollaston, he's in very good company. Wilmington and Brandywine Cemetery is a virtual who's who in Wilmington history. You don't even have to look far. Wollaston is buried right next to his son-in-law, Elwood Garrett, one of the first persons in America to use daguerreotype, an early photographic process. Elwood Garrett was also the eldest son of the great Thomas Garrett, Wilmington's famous abolitionist. Buried nearby is Josephine Tatnall Smith, the namesake of Brandywine Park's beloved Josephine Gardens. At the northern edge of the cemetery, just steps away from South Park Drive, you'll find the final resting place of Delaware's first governor, Dr. John McKinley. McKinley also helped establish the Delaware Medical Society. Nearby is Walter S. Carpenter Jr., who as president of the DuPont Company participated in the Manhattan Project, which led to the development of the atom bomb. Just to the right of Carpenter is the grave of noted philanthropist Harry Fletcher Brown, a DuPont chemist who achieved great fame for his development of smokeless gunpowder. Casual observers don't have to try very hard to find other familiar names such as Tatnall, Gilpin, Grubb, and this one, Samuel H. Baynard, the land developer of the area known today as the Triangle Neighborhood. Baynard Boulevard carries his name, as does Brandywine Park's Baynard Stadium. Perhaps one of the best reasons to visit Wilmington and Brandywine Cemetery is to enjoy the incredible variety of mortuary sculpture on display. Here you'll find craftsmanship and artistry rarely seen on contemporary grave markers. It's also interesting to note the various symbols on gravestones throughout the cemetery. Hands are commonly seen, whether pointing the way to heaven or gripping another hand, as in both a farewell to this world and a welcome into the afterlife. Many markers have drapery carved into them, symbolizing mourning. Wilmington and Brandywine is home to numerous angels, symbolizing faith and hope. Several stones are adorned with ivy, representing memory and fidelity. Celtic crosses can illustrate an Irish or Scottish heritage, as well as infinity, represented by the circle, which has no beginning or end. Broken columns signify death in the mist of life. Like the broken column, this unusual tree-shaped stone represents a life cut short. The cemetery is even home to a dog, which often signifies loyalty or a person worth loving. While walking around the cemetery, it's impossible to miss the large mausoleums housing the remains of some of Wilmington's wealthiest citizens. As an example, this impressive Greek Revival-style mausoleum is the final resting place of the Lobdell family. Most notably, the Wilmington industrialist George G. Lobdell of the Lobdell Car Wheel Company, once the world's largest manufacturer of railroad car wheels. The private mausoleums are not the only stately items adorning the Wilmington and Brandywine Cemetery. This is also home to some of the most impressive trees in the state. According to the Delaware Forest Service, 4 trees in the cemetery are believed to be the largest of their species in Delaware, including a flowering dogwood, a sassafras, a northern white cedar, and this stately sweet gum.
I hope you've enjoyed our late fall tour of the Wilmington and Brandywine Cemetery. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, seize the day and pay your respects to this amazing Wilmington landmark. It's located right next door to Wilmington Hospital between Delaware Avenue and the Brandywine River. For Wilmington in the middle of it all, I'm Rich Newman. Welcome to Where in Wilmington. My name is Mr. Newman. And today's history lesson is about one of Wilmington's great schools, P.S. DuPont, a proud part of the Brandywine School District. So spit out your gum, sit up straight, and pay close attention, because you never know when there might be a pop quiz.
P.S. DuPont School was built in 1934 at the intersection of 34th and Van Buren Streets in Wilmington's 9th Ward neighborhood. The school is named after Pierre Samuel DuPont II, one of Wilmington's most respected philanthropists and a fervent supporter of public education. Spurred into action by his cousin, Alfred I. DuPont, P.S. DuPont helped finance a sweeping reform effort that lasted for 14 years and led to the modernization of several schools, including Bancroft, Howard, and Warner, as well as the construction of several all-new schools, including Elbert, Harlan, and a vocational annex for Howard. But all of these efforts paled in comparison with the building of the school referred to at the time as the flagship of the fleet, P.S. DuPont School. P.S. DuPont was built in the colonial revival style by noted Wilmington architect E. William Martin, the same architect who designed nearby Harlan Elementary as well as Legislative Hall in Dover. To call the school imposing would be an understatement. In fact, students nicknamed the school the Palace. Constructed on a 22-acre site overlooking the city, the school is the third largest in the state and features over 5.1 acres of floor space. The building's distinctive white cupola, last month's Where in Wilmington clue, can be seen from a mile away. Although originally built as a high school, the school eventually became an elementary school. This year, the school is home to over 750 students in preschool, kindergarten, and 4th through 6th grades. At the time it was built, P.S. DuPont was absolutely state-of-the-art. But as with most schools with such a long history, P.S. DuPont began showing its age in recent years. Now, thanks to a comprehensive $44 million renovation, this impressive school has reclaimed its status as one of the finest, most up-to-date schools in the state.
Welcome to the main office. What makes P.S. DuPont so unique and fascinating is the mixture of old with the new. Now, the school has been completely renovated from top to bottom, but great care was taken to preserve the craftsmanship and the charm of a bygone era. Take, for instance, this antique call box. This was the school's original intercom system. Now, it's no longer working, but it was preserved and maintained just because of its historic significance. Now, right next door, you can see a state-of-the-art display showing the security system of the school today. It's this fascinating blend of what was old and state-of-the-art at the time and what is now currently state-of-the-art that makes this school so interesting, and you're going to see a lot of that on the tour today. At times, it feels like we're almost in a museum instead of a school.
Just inside the main entrance is the heart of the school, an incredible auditorium, the entrance of which is still flanked by 2 original ticket windows. Inside, the auditorium has been meticulously restored. Here you can find the original seats and floor. Underneath the seats are small ventilation openings referred to as mushroom caps. These were part of the original ventilation system. Today, these mushroom caps have been ingeniously tied into the school's new state-of-the-art HVAC system. Closer to the stage, you can see remnants from the school's original central vacuum system. Quite an innovation in 1934. Another uncommon feature is the balcony, which is still in use. No visit to a school is complete without stopping by the library. While P.S. DuPont's library has been fully outfitted with the latest computer technology, you can also find remnants of the building's glorious past, such as the original chandelier and the original library tables. Other lovingly restored rooms include the art room, part of which still features its original tile floor, the gymnasium with its dramatic arched roof, and the cafeteria with its recently rediscovered skylights.
Oh, excuse me, I was just doing a little bit of light cleaning. Welcome to one of P.S. DuPont's history rooms. These are rooms of historical significance that are going to be preserved largely as they were when the school was built in 1935. We happen to be standing in what was formerly known as the model apartment. This is where young women learned home economic skills, such vital life skills such as cleaning and decorating. There's even a little passageway in the back of the room. Why, you ask? So you can clean both sides of the window, silly. Another history room is on the first floor. This room still features original floor-to-ceiling wooden shelving and corresponding rolling ladders. The school plans to restore this room to its original 1934 condition to show what the original classrooms were like when the school was built. While the restoring architects took great pains to preserve the history of the school, they also recognized the importance of modern green building practices. The school was outfitted with maintenance-free flooring to reduce the need to use potentially harmful cleaning solutions. The school is also equipped with daylight harvesting light fixtures, which dim automatically when natural light is sufficient. I hope you've enjoyed spending a little time with me here at P.S. DuPont School. As much as I'd like to walk you outside, I'm afraid I'm going to have to stay behind. But I hope you'll join us next time on Where in Wilmington, when I'll have an all-new history lesson to share with you. For Wilmington in the middle of it all, I'm Rich Newman. That Wilmington shares with the rest of the United States. I'm talking about America's pastime, baseball. And what better place to celebrate baseball than with the Wilmington Blue Rocks, right here on Judy Johnson Field at Frawley Stadium. Now, the story of baseball in Wilmington is very long and rich, so it's going to be a bit of a whirlwind tour. After all, baseball's been played in Wilmington for well over 150 years. So brace yourself, here we go. Take the field, let's play ball! Baseball in Wilmington go way back. In fact, local amateur teams in our city began playing in organized leagues in the 1860s. Wilmington's first professional team, the Quick Steps, was founded around 1883 when the Interstate Association of Professional Baseball Clubs was founded. During this time of American history, baseball became deeply rooted in popular culture. The population of industrialized cities such as Wilmington was growing rapidly, and baseball offered a welcome change from the drudgery of rural life. City residents also had much more free time on their hands due to rapid advances in technology, both at home and in the workplace. Much like today, baseball games in the late 1800s provided Wilmingtonians with an action-filled activity that could be enjoyed by the whole family. Droves of people would ride the streetcar to watch the Quick Steps and other teams battle it out on Wilmington Ball Grounds at the southwest corner of Front and Union Streets, home to all of Wilmington's professional ball teams until World War I. Organized baseball came to a virtual halt with the beginning of World War I in 1918 because the young male players were diverted into military service and for work in war industries, including shipbuilding along Wilmington's Christina riverfront. But even a world war couldn't keep baseball down for long. Many big league players found work in Wilmington's Harlan and Hollingsworth shipyard, and soon industrial teams formed their own league and played ball on the newly built Harlan Field, once located in South Wilmington Park just across the Market Street Bridge. In fact, Shoeless Joe Jackson of Black Sox infamy once played for a team known as the Wilmington Shipbuilders. Following World War I, the Industrial League players left Wilmington to return home. Around this time, the old Wilmington grounds at Front and Union, also known as Union Park, was replaced with residential development, today's Union Park Gardens neighborhood. Following the demise of the World War I-era industrial leagues, Harlan Field would continue for many years as the home of another great baseball tradition, Negro League ball. The golden era of Negro League baseball started in the 1920s and ended around 1950. It's interesting to note that baseball wasn't always segregated, and many mixed-race teams played together in the formative years of the sport. But all too soon, baseball gave way to societal pressures and prejudices, and blacks were forbidden to play in professional leagues. In response, the Negro Leagues were formed to prove that black players had just as much talent as white players. And the Negro Leagues were very successful. In fact, by the 1940s, Negro League baseball had become one of the largest and most successful black-owned business enterprises in America.
The era of the Negro Leagues ended after Jackie Robinson broke the race barrier in 1947 when drafted by the Brooklyn Dodgers. No story on Wilmington baseball would be complete without paying tribute to one of the greatest players and coaches ever to grace the ballparks of Wilmington. Of course, I'm speaking of Judy Johnson, Hall of Famer and namesake of the playing field here at Frawley Stadium. Johnson's sharp fielding skills, consistently high batting average, and uncanny ability to produce runs made him the most valuable player in the lineup of the powerful Hilldale Club during the 1920s, and one of the greatest third basemen of his era, not just in Negro Leagues, but in all of baseball. Although Johnson retired 9 years before the integration of the major leagues, he was eventually able to apply his baseball knowledge in the majors, becoming the first African American to coach Major League Baseball in 1954, coaching for the Philadelphia Athletics and later the Phillies. Johnson was the first Delawarean inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York in 1975. At the same time the Negro Leagues were playing on Wilmington's Harlan Field, an all-new minor league stadium rose from the ground at the intersection of 30th Street and Governor Prince Boulevard, also known as Northeast Boulevard. This would be Wilmington Park, home of the original Wilmington Blue Rocks. Wilmington Park was one of the finest minor league facilities in the country. When it opened on May 1, 1940, over 7,000 fans crowded into the new stadium to watch the Blue Rocks play their first game in the new Interstate League, including baseball legend Connie Mack, the longest-serving manager in Major League Baseball history, as well as the longtime owner of the Philadelphia Athletics. Connie Mack and Delaware businessman and sports enthusiast R.R.M. Carpenter Sr. joined forces to bring professional baseball back to Wilmington. Carpenter built the stadium, and Connie Mack furnished the Blue Rocks team, which began as an affiliate of the Philadelphia Athletics. Mack owned the Blue Rocks for the first 4 years of their existence. Another Hall of Famer, Chief Bender, served as the Blue Rocks' first manager. In 1943, Carpenter took full ownership of the club. For their final 9 years, the original Blue Rocks were an affiliate of the Philadelphia Phillies. Wilmington Park was also home to football, basketball, and boxing. But it was the Blue Rocks who drew the biggest crowds. This wild popularity wouldn't last. The Blue Rocks suffered from decreasing attendance due to several reasons, most namely the introduction of television and urban flight and suburbanization. The Blue Rocks disbanded in 1952, and Wilmington Park was demolished in the early 1960s. Just when it seemed that professional baseball was forever lost in Wilmington, Frawley Stadium opened its gates in 1993, serving as the catalyst for the amazing transformation of the Christina Riverfront. Prior to the arrival of the new Wilmington Blue Rocks, this area of the city was originally the home of Wilmington's once thriving shipbuilding industry. By the mid-1800s, Wilmington was producing more iron ships than the rest of the country combined. Unfortunately, the shipbuilding industry collapsed in the period following World War II, and the area remained an industrial wasteland for decades. All this changed beginning in the 1980s when a dedicated group of civic visionaries, led by Mayor Baker, who was city council president at the time, realized the potential of the Wilmington riverfront and set in motion a plan to redevelop the area. Frawley Stadium was one of the first steps taken in the effort to transform the Riverfront District into the thriving cultural, commercial, and residential destination we see today. The stadium is named after the late Daniel Frawley, mayor of Wilmington from 1985 to 1993. Mayor Frawley was another advocate of bringing professional baseball back to Wilmington. For more than 17 years, the 6,532-seat stadium has thrilled visitors of all ages as they continue to take part in the great American tradition of minor league baseball. Year after year, the Blue Rocks franchise tops the attendance records for the Carolina League. The stadium is also home to the 5,000-square-foot Delaware Sports Hall of Fame, where you can learn more about Judy Johnson as well as all the other great athletes featured inside, including Delaware's other baseball Hall of Famers, such as the famed pitcher Robin Roberts and the baseball umpire Bill McGowan. Well, we're almost out of time, but I couldn't leave without giving it the old college try one last time. You know, I used to be quite the ball player in my younger years. I was quite the slugger, and I had to be because I couldn't run very fast. Let's see if old Putt-Putt's got any power left. Well, you heard the umpire. I'm out of here, and so is Where in Wilmington. Join us next time as we continue to explore all of our city's rich history. For Wilmington in the middle of it all, I'm Rich Newman.
Wilmington, Delaware, a thriving, vibrant city with a rich history and a bright future. A city that in recent years has experienced unprecedented growth in its historic neighborhoods, downtown business district, and riverfront. A city that is truly in the middle of it all. Wilmington's future wasn't always so bright. Like most American cities, Wilmington suffered as a result of the great population shift to the suburbs after World War II. Wilmington faced the same neglect, stagnation, and blight that crippled dozens of other cities along the eastern seaboard. Wilmington's crisis came to a head in the late 1960s with a period of racial unrest and eventually rioting. In the middle of this challenging and chaotic time, a bus arrived at Wilmington's Greyhound Station in August of 1966, carrying a 24-year-old Vista volunteer from the small Midwestern town of Fostoria, Ohio. Little did anyone suspect, this transplant from Ohio would shepherd the city through the tumultuous 1960s and the hard-luck 1970s and help build a prosperous, ecologically sustainable city that is the envy of every municipality in the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond. James M. Baker was born in 1942 to parents John and Alpha Baker. Then known by his middle name, Michael, Baker was one of 7 children. Michael and his older brother John Jr. were raised by his grandmother following his father's death. In high school, Baker established himself as a star player on his high school basketball team. After graduation, Baker enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, and upon his honorable discharge in 1966, first dedicated himself to public service as a Vista volunteer. At the time, few suspected that the thin, unassuming Baker would quickly transform from social worker to community leader to elected official, eventually becoming Wilmington's first ever 3-term mayor.
Well, I first met Jim Baker in 1969. He was a Vista volunteer, and his service area was West Center City. And we were what was called then community youth workers. And it was our task to go out to mingle with the community. And our goal was for those that were unemployed to try to see that they had gotten jobs. For those that wanted to go to school, whether it was to get a 4-year degree or a 2-year degree, was to look at the possibilities for them and make the necessary contacts. Jim was always out there, always concerned about the community, and if you needed something done and you contacted Jim Baker, for the most part it was done.
When Jim first came to Wilmington, I would say, and he was young, enthusiastic, tall and skinny, had a sense of right and wrong, had a sense of what racial discrimination did to people, not just the terms racial discrimination, and a sense of humanitarianism. And interestingly enough, a sense of organization and how to get things done. That was key. But he was quiet, very quiet, not a loud person. But when he opened his mouth, it was almost like, what's that commercial? When so-and-so talks, everybody listens. That was Jim. Yeah.
Baker's political career began in 1972 when he was elected to serve on Wilmington City Council as a district councilman. In 1984, Baker became the first African American to be elected council president, a position he held until his election as mayor in 2001, making him the longest-serving council president in Wilmington's history.
His leadership was really unique because most people in those kinds of leadership positions try to forge alliances with all the members of council, try to do something out of the ordinary to make them feel comfortable with him. Baker's goal was really, I've got a goal, and I think the goal would benefit council, and I would like for you to come along. But if you choose not to, then that's on you. And so his was a different kind of leadership style. And for the first term that I served on city council, Baker pretty much had 3 or 4 people that were always giving him hell for whatever the reason. And I just happened to be one of those, but it was Arthur Scott, Joe White, Loretta Walsh. All of us were a part of that new breed of members that went on city council in 1984. And that group had 6 new members. And Baker had to deal with 6 people that had no understanding of council or of governance. And he pretty much taught us the ropes.
Darius, when we were first on the council together, was a ball of energy coming in the door, and he's a ball of energy going out the door. Darius had some very innovative ideas. He was constantly in the tech world. He was constantly into upgrading us and moving us into a new generation of how to best reach out to our constituency. He is very active and very involved. And that's the one thing I'll miss about Darius is that spirit.
He is a guy who knows the process. When it comes to legislation, the introduction, just the decorum, he knows all of that. And a lot of times we used to joke about him, if there was an agenda where he didn't have a piece of legislation on, it's like, what's going on tonight? Because almost without fail, Darius Brown would always introduce some form of legislation, be it an ordinance or a resolution, for every single meeting it appeared. He definitely had the knowledge base that was needed to get things done.
So creating pathways out of poverty is looking at how we really shine a light on issues of poverty around different domestic policy issues and local issues that we deal with here in the city of Wilmington. I believe the way that we create pathways out of poverty is through education and employment. And so with me coming on council, the very first thing I did was hold a Creating Pathways Out of Poverty forum at the Nemours building in downtown Wilmington, where I brought in the Half in 10 team from the Center for American Progress, which is a public policy think tank in Washington, D.C. The Half in 10 program is a program to reduce poverty in half over the next 10 years. And so we're about halfway through that, and we're continuing that work. Here locally in the city of Wilmington, I wanted to address issues of poverty by addressing hunger and nutrition. And so I partnered with the Food Bank of Delaware and providing programming in partnership with our Northeast State Service Center, which is in the 3rd District, and also Westside Health in the 3rd District. With Westside Health, we provided a food pantry, and we gave out food from the food bank. And then also with the Northeast State Service Center, we partnered with Bank of America, and Bank of America purchasing a mobile van for the food bank, and the food bank then being able to go around the city of Wilmington providing
food for individuals that were in need. So that's one of the ways that we work to create pathways out of poverty, by addressing hunger and nutrition. Also working with our Wilmington Head Start to look at the nutritious meals that are being provided to our young people through their program. So that's been my commitment, to raise awareness around poverty in the city of Wilmington, and then looking at the solutions around education and employment to reduce poverty and create upward mobility for our residents. Working Neighborhoods is City to Work. So I've been proud of my record in City to Work and how we connect city residents to employment opportunities. And we've done that in a few different ways. One way is a partnership that was established to apply to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for a workforce development grant. And through that EPA grant, we are now training individuals in the city of Wilmington for brownfield remediation and wastewater jobs. It's a part of our employment sector that has a high demand and a high growth. So working with our coalition, our Brownfield Coalition, those partners came together for our Brownfield Coalition, and we applied to the EPA. We were awarded the grant. We are now in our second year of the grant, where we're training people at Del Tech and then placing them at different companies throughout the Mid-Atlantic region for employment, creating that upward mobility for residents that were previously unemployed or underemployed. And these are ex-felons, these are veterans, these are individuals that have been out of work for a while, and now they're able to be retooled, retrained, and then be employed. Another one of those partnerships in creating working neighborhoods is because I believe a working neighborhood is a neighborhood where individuals on the block that live in the 3rd District, if they're employed, they're not able, or they won't be involved in many of the undesirable things that take away from the neighborhood. So with Working Neighborhoods, not only did we do our EPA program, but we created wilmington.tweetmyjobs.com, which is a jobs platform where residents can go onto the website for free and they can search for jobs. They can also download the app so they can have it on their smartphone, where they can be alerted for jobs under different employment sectors that they may be interested in. And then also, as a part of wilmington.tweetmyjobs.com, we have a free platform for employers, where employers can go onto the site and post jobs for free, and then employ city residents using the Tweet My Job site.
In high school, I struggled. I struggled for a lot of reasons. Class time for me, it was difficult because I had difficulty sitting still. I was what you would call a pretty hyper child. So as I matured, I realized that I had to take it serious, and I had to study, and I had to pay special attention to things, because studying, it didn't come easy to me. I had to work at it. When I was in high school, if we saw a kid with his nose in a book, or studying more than everyone else, we probably would call him nerdy or something like that. But what I realize now is that those same individuals are now running companies. They're now in charge of governments. I mean, they're doing really well. So what I would change is I would spend more time in the classroom, focus on getting great grades and preparing for my future, because those same individuals that I may have made fun of because they had their nose in the book all the time, they're now our bosses. School is the foundation for your future earnings, your future jobs. And so we ask kids all the time, what do you want to do with your life? And kids in high school, because oftentimes they look at you like, I'm a teenager, why would you ask me that now? And the truth is now is the time you have to decide. Do you want to end up in jail? Do you want to end up dead on the street somewhere? Or do you want to end up having a nice house with a nice family, a nice car? And when you usually say things like that to kids, I want a great car. I want a beautiful wife, and 2.5 children, things like that. We point that out to them now because it's important that you have to plan for your future. After being in law enforcement for 20 years, I've seen where families have been torn apart because of things like substance abuse, alcohol abuse, domestic violence. And that all kind of goes hand in hand with individuals who don't have the education or the experience to understand how to deal with real life issues. So staying in school, getting good grades, all that will prepare you for a brighter future. I've seen kids who've dropped out. I've seen kids who were little, who I unfortunately had to arrest for a variety of crimes. And now, 20 years later, I'm seeing their kids' who are doing the same thing or getting into trouble for committing crimes. It's a learned behavior. So if you can stay in school and stay away from that criminal element, you'll do well in life. So your choices are real simple. You go to school, you get good grades. You know, college might not be for everyone, but for employers, people who are looking to employ young people, they want college now. So you can go to school and excel and do the hard work now so it'll be easier later in life. Or you can take what you may think is the easy road, quit school. But that path will take you to nowhere. That path will take you to jail. That path will take you to maybe losing your life on the street somewhere.
My name is Sil Wolford, and today I'm excited about doing some Wilmington history. If you ask most Wilmingtonians who was the first African American city councilman, they would tell you that it was John Hopkins Sr. John Hopkins Sr. was an impressive African American city councilman here in Wilmington for 32 years. And again, for those of us who go back far enough, we know that he owned the National Theater, the Black Theater in Wilmington, and he also owned the Hopkins Theater. But John Hopkins was not the first African American city councilman. The first African American city councilman was Thomas Postels, and he was elected to the city council in 1901. And 1901 is 14 years before Hopkins became city councilman. So he was really a pioneer and a groundbreaker. He was elected in 1901, and obviously this was an incredible event for the city of Wilmington. And so there was much celebration about him having been elected. He was supported by a gentleman by the name of John Edward Attucks. Attucks was a politician who came from Pennsylvania with lots of money. And he came to Delaware because he thought he could be made a U.S. Senator quicker if he were here in Delaware. And I don't want to say politics was corrupt, but it was a different kind of political situation than we have now. And Thomas Postell was on his team. He was called a Attucks Republican. It wasn't even called a Republican. These were Attucks Republican. He had his own political organization. And Thomas Postell rode in on this wave of this Attucks movement of Attucks rising to political prominence here in the city of Wilmington and in the state of Delaware.
This was the diving board area, and I was one of the guards, and they weren't allowed to, there was a 3-meter board. And if you fell off sideways, you landed on the darn cement over there. And Corn Pop was a bad dude, and he ran a bunch of bad boys. And I did, and back in those days, to show how things have changed, one of the things you had to use, if you used pomade in your hair, you had to wear a bathing cap. And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, "Hey, Esther, you, off the board, or I'll come up and drag you off." Well, he came off, and he said, "I'll meet you outside." My car, these were all public housing behind it. My car, there was a gate out here. I parked my car outside the gate. And he said, "I'll be waiting for you." He was waiting for 3 guys in straight razors. Not a joke. There was a guy named Bill Wright, Mouse, the only white guy, and he did all the pools. He was the mechanic. And I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "Come down here in the basement where mechanics, where all the pool filter is." You know the chain, there used to be a chain that went across the deep end. And he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up, he said, you walk out with that chain. And you walk to the car and say, you may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head. I said, you kidding me? He said, no, if you don't come back. And he was right. So I walked out with the chain. And I walked up to my car. And they had, in those days, you used to remember the straight razor. You'd bang them on the curb, get them rusty, put them in a rain barrel, get them rusty. And I looked at him, but I was smart then. I said, first of all, I said, when I tell you to get off the board, you get off the board, and I'll kick you out again, but I shouldn't have called you Esther Williams. I apologize for that. I apologize, but I didn't know that apology was going to work. He said, you apologize to me? I said, I apologize for that, not for throwing you out, but I apologize for what I said. He said, okay, close the straight razor, and my heart began to beat again.